Jeremy Clarkson has, over the course of 4 decades, dismissed more cars than most people will ever drive. He has famously turned the word diesel into a joke, comparing the fuel to a disease. He has described Volvos as cars for boring people. He once wrote that buying a sensible family SUV was, in his words, tantamount to announcing that a part of your anatomy had stopped working. So it is worth taking a moment to consider the car currently sitting in his driveway at his Oxfordshire farm. It is a diesel Range Rover, parked next to a Volvo. And that is not even the most interesting contradiction in his garage: the man and the verdict. To understand why Clarkson's personal collection is so surprising, you have to first understand what his opinions actually mean, and why they carry the weight they do. For most of his career, a negative Clarkson review was not just criticism, it was a cultural event. Manufacturers whose cars he dismissed on Top Gear would sometimes see sales dip in the weeks following broadcast. His opinions had consequences. Not because he was always right, and he wasn't, but because he had an audience of tens of millions of people who trusted that what he said was exactly what he felt, unfiltered and unsponsored. That authenticity was the whole product. The entire career was built on the idea that this man would tell you the truth about a car, even if the truth was unpleasant, even if the manufacturer objected, even if it made uncomfortable television. Which is exactly what makes his private garage so fascinating. Because the cars he ended up owning, the ones he bought with his own money, the ones he chose to keep, repeatedly, almost systematically, contradicted the person he presented on screen. The Volvo problem. Let's start with the most dramatic example. Clarkson grew up around Volvos. His father owned one, a 265 GLE. His sister drove a 345. He has written about both with barely concealed horror, describing the 345 as being powered by some rubber bands, and saying that even now, thinking about it makes him feel pale and frightened. The Volvo of his childhood was the automotive equivalent of a beige cardigan, functional, sensible, and completely devoid of any reason to feel anything at all. He carried that prejudice into his professional life with enthusiasm. For years, telling people you had bought a Volvo was, according to Clarkson, not something you did in polite conversation. And then, in the early 2000s, something happened that he didn't entirely plan. He needed a family car, 3 children, an estate in Oxfordshire, a life that required ferrying people and things across significant distances. He drove a Volvo XC90. And he didn't hate it. He didn't just not hate it. He became, slowly and apparently against his will, obsessed with it. He described it as the most underrated vehicle ever made. He used one during a Top Gear special in Africa, nicknamed it the Invincible. Watched it conquer deserts and rivers and roads that weren't really roads, and then refused to give it back after filming ended. He has since owned 4 XC9s. 4. The man who spent years telling audiences that Volvos were for boring people with no pulse has bought the same model 4 separate times. The second generation gave him pause. He admitted he was skeptical. But within months he was writing columns praising its quiet diesel engine and its interior refinement. He even conceded in print that Volvo's image had completely transformed, that young, stylish people in London were now driving them, that the well-parked cars in supermarket car parks were all Volvos. He had spent 20 years mocking a brand and then watched, slightly baffled, as the world caught up with the conclusion he'd already reached privately: the diesel contradiction. Which brings us to the engine sitting under that beloved XC90. Clarkson's hatred of diesel is one of the most consistent positions of his entire career. He has called them diesel. He has argued repeatedly and loudly that the diesel engine is an affront to the driving experience, agricultural, noisy, fundamentally joyless. His objections are not merely practical, they are almost philosophical. The diesel engine, in Clarkson's public worldview, represents everything wrong with the direction modern cars are heading. His Volvo XC90 has a diesel engine. His Range Rover daily driver, the car he has called one of the best he has ever owned, the car he uses every single day on the farm, the car that appears constantly in Clarkson's farm, loaded with mud and dogs and whatever chaos the week has produced, also has a diesel engine. A 3.6-liter turbocharged diesel V8 to be precise. He knows this. He has acknowledged it. His explanation, delivered with the particular tone of a man who has been caught in an argument with himself, is essentially that there are diesels and then there are good diesels, and that the ones he owns happen to fall into the second category. It is not an entirely satisfying defense, but it is at least honest. The Ford GT, the car that broke him. Not every contradiction in Clarkson's garage is about learning to love something he once dismissed. Some of them run in the opposite direction. The car he desperately wanted that then destroyed him. When Ford reintroduced the GT in 2005, Clarkson pursued one with the dedication of a man who had been waiting his entire career for this particular moment. The original Ford GT40 was his automotive mythology. The car that beat Ferrari at Le Mans in 1966, the most American automotive underdog story ever told. The new GT was its modern expression, a supercar that cost a fraction of the Italian competition and, on paper, matched it in almost every way. He got one, and within months, it had broken him so completely that he sold it and announced, publicly, definitively, that he would never own another supercar. The alarm system misfired constantly. The car was, by his own account, completely impractical and almost impossible to live with. He had wanted it so much for so long that the reality of ownership couldn't possibly compete with the idea of it. The GT wasn't a bad car. It was a brilliant car that was being asked to do something brilliant cars are not designed to do. To exist in ordinary life, to start reliably on a Tuesday morning, to not be a source of daily frustration to someone who actually had to use it. He swore off supercars entirely after that experience. He has largely held to it. The Ford GT did not just leave his garage. It left a mark on his entire collecting philosophy. The Alfa Romeo paradox. If the Volvo story is about a man who changed his mind, and the Ford GT story is about a man who got what he wanted and found it wasn't what he thought, then the Alfa Romeo story is something different again. It is about a man who knew exactly what he was getting into, got into it anyway, and has never fully recovered. Clarkson called the Alfa Romeo GT V6 the best and worst car he ever owned. Not one or the other. Both simultaneously. He is entirely clear-eyed about what Alfa Romeos are: temperamental, unreliable, engineering decisions made with the heart rather than the head. Cars that will let you down at the worst possible moment and be utterly captivating while doing it. He owns one anyway. He bought the Alfa 8C Competizione. He bought the GT V6. He drove an Alfa in a Grand Tour episode in Scotland, and then, rather than hand it back at the end of filming, kept it. Because of course he did. His relationship with Alfa Romeo is not rational. He has never claimed it is. It is the automotive equivalent of a difficult friendship. You know the trouble it causes, you've experienced it firsthand, and you choose it again regardless. There is something almost admirable about that level of self-awareness combined with complete inability to act on it. The Toyota GR Yaris, the most surprising verdict of his career. In 2019, Clarkson sat down to write a review of the Toyota GR Yaris. His opening line set the scene. The Yaris, he wrote, was a car you buy because you think the Honda Jazz is a bit too racy. It was, in his telling, the automotive choice of recently widowed elderly women on their way to Bridge Club. He then drove it. And somewhere between the opening paragraph and the conclusion, something shifted completely. He declared the GR Yaris one of the most thrilling cars he had ever driven. Not one of the most thrilling small cars or one of the most thrilling cheap cars. One of the most thrilling cars, full stop. He subsequently gave it Car of the Year at the News UK Motor Awards, putting a hot Toyota hatchback ahead of everything else that had come out that year. This, more than almost any other moment, captures what Clarkson's contradictions are actually about. He did not lie in his opening paragraph. He genuinely expected to be underwhelmed. He went in with low expectations shaped by the brand, the segment, the price point, and the badge. And the car simply refused to confirm any of them. His opinion changed because the evidence demanded it, which, when you think about it, is exactly what you want from someone whose job is to tell you the truth about cars. The Bentley and the grandfather. There is one final vehicle in Clarkson's garage that is worth understanding because it explains something about all the others. He owns a Bentley Flying Spur, a luxury saloon that does not, in any conventional sense, fit the identity of a man who built his career on speed, noise, and irreverence. The Flying Spur is the car you choose when the journey matters more than the driving, when arriving is the point. But the reason he bought it is not about cars at all. His grandfather always had Bentleys, and his grandfather, whenever he took delivery of a new one, would say the same thing. This one will see me out. This will be the last one. He said it for decades, bought several more, and lived long enough to keep being wrong. Clarkson bought the Flying Spur and said the same thing his grandfather used to say, that this one will see him out. He has spent 40 years reviewing cars as experiences, as performances, as things that should make you feel something. And the car he ended up with, the one sitting at the end of his own automotive story, is the one his grandfather would have recognized, not because it is the fastest or the rarest or the most dramatic thing in the garage, but because it carries a meaning that no specification sheet can capture, the pattern underneath all of it. Clarkson's contradictions are not hypocrisy. They are something more interesting than that. He has always reviewed categories, concepts, the idea of a Volvo, the idea of a diesel, the idea of a sensible family car, and his opinions on those categories have often been harsh, dismissive, and entirely consistent with someone who believes that driving should feel like something. But what he actually owns tells a different story. It is a collection built on specific experiences, individual cars that refuse to behave the way their category suggested they should. The XC90 that turned out to be invincible in Africa. The GR Yaris that turned out to be one of the most thrilling things he had ever driven. The Alfa that he knew would let him down and bought anyway, because the good days were worth the bad ones. The public Clarkson has strong opinions. The private Clarkson has a diesel Range Rover, 4 Volvos, an unreliable Italian car he cannot stop buying, and a Bentley that will see him out. They are not the same person. And the gap between them is, arguably, more revealing than either one on their own. Subscribe to Drive Directive and tell us in the comments, which Clarkson contradiction surprised you the most?